Recently, New York Times bestselling author and leadership expert Michael Hyatt made the following comment on his LinkedIn profile. He said, "Speaking out takes courage. You will never grow into the leader you were meant to be if you're not willing to take a risk and occasionally speak up. But being a suck-up will not get you promoted. Being courageous eventually will, so long as it's done in the right spirit." His comment really made me think, when it comes to speaking up and speaking out, what is the better mindset that will lead to a better life? Maybe it's just semantics, but my first thought is that we're really talking about two different things here, each of which requires a different way of thinking. To me, speaking out implies that a grievous error, perhaps something unethical or even unlawful, is being committed, and someone needs the courage to step forward and call attention to it, regardless of the potential risk to oneself. Now, on the other hand, to speak up, well, that sounds more like having the courage to express an opinion or an insight, even if it digresses from the one that's being offered by the, quote, most powerful person in the room. If I'm being a suck-up to someone by hiding my true opinion, well, that's kind of a gray area. I mean, maybe I'm just being wise. Or, as one commenter on Michael Hyatt's post said, I'm just reading the room. Knowing when to speak up and when to remain silent, well, that's an art in and of itself, and it probably deserves its own podcast episode. But if I'm being a suck-up to someone engaged in behavior that needs to be spoken out against, well, that's a serious character issue on my part. In fact, under the Old Testament law recorded in Leviticus 5:1, it says, if a person sins because he does not speak up when he hears a public charge to testify regarding something that he has seen or learned about, he will be held responsible. Or, to use today's legal language, you become complicit and subject to the law yourself. The Apostle Paul advised his young friend Timothy, saying, "As for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all, so that the rest may stand in fear." The key word, of course, is persist. In other words, you've already tried over and over to help this person, and they simply refuse to listen or repent. And then in the 5th chapter of his letter to the believers in Ephesus, Paul wrote, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them." Now, there's a well-known story in the Old Testament from the book of 2 Samuel in which God sends Nathan to confront David about his sin against both Bathsheba and her husband Uriah. I can't imagine a more humanly frightening scenario during this period of history than having to stand face to face with the king and say to him, "You have sinned and you're going to pay dearly for it." But that's exactly what Nathan did. He spoke out against the king, even though he could have been executed on the spot. That's just one example from the Old Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus clearly had no trouble doing this either. One blogger pointed out that 17 times Jesus called people hypocrites in the scriptures. In 9 of those instances, he was talking specifically to church leaders and teachers. And 4 times, the Bible tells us that Jesus called people vipers, a stealthy, inconspicuous, deadly snake. Those people wielded deadly tongues and doctrines that literally bit into other people's lives and destroyed them. Jesus clearly understood when to speak out. In our culture today, it seems everyone is speaking out against some sort of perceived evil. Even if at some point we were far too silent, the pendulum has definitely swung in the extreme opposite direction. And we really seem to love that phrase, quote, "speak truth to power," don't we? Or at least we love it when it seems convenient to further our own agendas. If scriptures tell us to speak out against evil, what's the problem here? I think it's the heart of the proclamation. Are we speaking out as a way of attacking and hurting, or as a way of protecting and healing? Ezekiel 3:18 says, "If I say to the wicked," and this is God talking, "you shall surely die, and then you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way in order to save his life? That wicked person shall die for his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. The speaking out that Ezekiel called for was all about saving lives. Ephesians 4 is really instructive here. It says we're to speak the truth in love. I'm sure you've heard that well-worn quip, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, to paraphrase Ephesians 4, we might say that people won't care about your truth until they know firsthand about your love. Paul even gave Timothy a description of a good leader. Included in that description, he said, they are, quote, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome. If your version of speaking out is to pick fights and attack, there's a pretty strong possibility that you're thinking about this all the wrong way. A better way to think about it is to pray for God to give you both courage and compassion at the same time, so that when you do speak out, you're doing so to save lives and bring about healing and benefit to others, even to those you're speaking out against. Remember, a better mind always leads to a better life.